Hello everyone, thanks for dropping by. This is the second video I'm doing today. I uploaded one to my channel earlier on this morning, but there was no audio, I was told by one of my subscribers, MGTOW Cowboy. So I'm going to have to do this all again. I use the opportunity to have another look round for more stuff on the topic this week. So it could be a bit rushed, or it'd probably be a bit longer than the 20 minutes. But anyway, this is just in case you're wondering why I'm late uploading a video. And in case you didn't know who she is, that's Leah Seydoux. I've only ever seen her in Spectre. Would I date her? The inevitable question if I was super wealthy. Nope. She's a centimetre taller than me, and plus she's French, and the English and French relationships, it just doesn't happen. We're too culturally different. Plus Leah there is already in a relationship, and her partner is, no surprises for guessing, in the knocking on the door of 6 foot or a little over 6 foot. Plus she's had a child with him, a little boy who's 17 months old now. Now he knows that his son, he's the biological father of his son, but paternity fraud is a major issue all over the world, and but there are moves that going against it, and women will be held accountable. Because looking around over the weekend, I found this. As you can see, in El Salvador, the President Nayib Bukele has signed into law a controversial measure requiring mandatory DNA testing for all children in El Salvador at birth to verify their biological parentage. Now that will put a stop to El Salvadorian women being unfaithful to their partners and committed infidelity and getting knocked up by a man who they're not legally attached to. He says he defended the law, stating it's not against women but against lies aimed at preventing men from unknowingly raising children who are not biologically theirs. The genetic verification system law mandates that all tests be conducted in certified laboratories and a state covering costs for low-income families. Now naturally this law has sparked nationwide debate. Supporters praise it as a step forward toward family transparency and protecting paternal rights, but while critics, mostly a lot of women no doubt, warn it represents state overreach and raises ethical and privacy concerns. Well, the woman shouldn't sleep around and get knocked up by men who she's not legally connected with, like her husband or her long-term partner. El Salvador the first country in Latin America to implement a nationwide mandatory genetic verification system for civil registration. And there's the president signing it. And if you speak Spanish, I found this. It's all in Spanish, and that's a description of what's happened, all in Spanish. I can't read Spanish, so if you can read Spanish, you can read that. Now, in support of that in Latin America, I found this. This is the Dominican Republic, and the Dominican News Online proposing mandate DNA testing for all children born infringes on the fundamental right of privacy. Denise Charles, that's her opposition. Tourism Minister Denise Charles has disagreed with statements by opposition Senator Lorraine Henderson Reed, who called for a mandatory DNA testing of all children in Dominica at birth. She delivered remarks during the debate of Maintenance of Children Act in Parliament this week. said mandatory DNA testing is necessary whether the baby is from marriage or not. According to her, this will avoid some fathers from paying child support to children that are not theirs. And then we have more talk about it. But it seems to be the hot topic, and it's not going away, because over in the West Indies, the Caribbean, I found this, CaribbeanNationalWeekly.com. Jamaican lawmakers want mandatory DNA testing at birth to combat paternity fraud. This was done on January 19th, 2025. This one was done on April 28th, 2023. So it's been rumbling along for quite a while. Where is it? Where is it? Here we go. Paternity fraud is not a new issue, said Dr. Herbert Gailey, a leading anthropologist at the University of West Indies. It found that 25% of Jamaican men are unknowingly raising children who are not biologically theirs. This phenomenon, the Jamaicans call, is raising a jacket, has long been a concern in the Caribbean nation. The issue has impacted Jamaican men in the diaspora, particularly those seeking to have their children join them in America. DNA tests are required by the U.S. Embassy in Kingston to prove biological relationships, to stop the unregistered illegals pouring into America. However, a leaked diplomatic cable revealed that 1 in 10 men who present DNA test results in the embassy are informed they are not the biological fathers of the children they are attempting to sponsor. And further evidence of the widespread nature of paternity fraud comes from a 2019 report, a Jamaican company offering DNA testing services. According to the report, 70% of paternity cases conducted by the company since 2015 returned results that confirmed the man was not the biological father. And SPORT, it says 2 well-known cases. Here we go. Clark called for, get rid of that. Clark called for DNA testing to raise was further fueled by recent high-profile revelations that 2 well-known Jamaicans, an entertainer and a sports figure, discovered they were not the biological fathers of children they had been raising. And if you go down the bottom, while many Jamaicans continue to joke about the jacket issue, it remains a serious matter in the courts. Women who knowingly name the wrong man as the father on a childbirth certificate can face penalties under the registration, including a fine up to $250,000 or imprisonment for up to 3 months. Only 3 months for wrecking a man's life. Now that is in Jamaica. Over in Africa, in Botswana, the situation is even worse. Paternity fraud sparks push for mandatory DNA testing in SADC. And in Botswana, Global DNA Genetics Center in Gaborone conducted over 2,500 paternity tests between 22 and 25. 70% confirmed that presumed fathers were not biologically related to the children in the question. Now, next door to Botswana in Zimbabwe, it's 72% of tested men receive negative results. And other countries in the region, such as Malawi, Mozambique, South Africa, and Zambia, lacks formal statistics reports indicating that paternity fraud is also widespread in these territories, adding to growing concerns across the South African development community. So women in Africa are running rampant, sleeping with whoever they want, getting knocked up by people they're not married to or in a relationship with, and passing the other guy's baby off as their own. However, where's the other bit? Here we go. However, Namibia's Minister of Justice of Labour Relations this week ruled out mandatory DNA testing following calls from members of Parliament to address paternity fraud. So Namibia is holding up, turning its back against it, but eventually even Namibia will have to adopt paternity fraud and DNA testing to justify who's the real parent and most specifically the real father of the child. Now that is in Botswana. Still in Africa, Ghanaian journalist urges President Mahama to introduce mandatory DNA tests for all newborns. This was done 19th of November 2025. This was done 15th of May 2025. Top Ghanaian journalist has boldly advocated more accountability for men in Guyana. The journalist urged the president to introduce a system mandating paternity tests for all families and hospitals. His comment has garnered widespread reactions online as more men add their voices. And he urges that several Ghanaian men are raising children who are not biologically theirs. According to him, men are being misled too often. It is time the government intervenes to protect those who might otherwise hesitate to take action. Taking tests for all newborns in hospital could prevent many future heartbreaks. His comment follows a rising situation where men later discovered that the children they believed were not theirs. And we have an example. Ex-Guyana international Nili Odati Lamptey admitted he had a moment of emotional distress after discovering that the 3 children he raised with his ex-wife were not biologically his, so his ex-wife was playing around. Former Andalusian Aston Villa forward said he had a gun in his car but decided against drastic action after reflecting on his future. His ex-wife, Gloria Appiah, separated in 2013 after results confirmed he was not the father of their children. The revelation ended their 20-year marriage, so she's lied to him for 20 years, led to a protracted legal dispute over compensation. And then he reportedly confirmed that his 3 children were not his biologically, 21 years after marriage. And there's a TikTok video about it. He conducted the DNA test of his ex-wife, demanded half of his properties. And then, talking more about it, and then another case in Africa. Anyway, that's in Ghana. Over in Kenya, still in Africa, the government refutes mandatory DNA tests for newborns. That's the minister who says they're not going to do it. Notice it's a woman. The Ministry of Health on Tuesday refuted claims that the government was rolling out mandatory DNA tests. This was done on 11th of April in 2024. Relating to the Post, Ministry of Health announced they had no plan to roll out such a policy. Additionally, members of the public were asked to always verify any information before sharing, so as to be part of the solution. Excuse me. The new flag post had been attributed to the Health Cabinet Secretary Susan I'm not going to pronounce that, has been subject to online trolling due to ongoing medic strike. The doctors are on strike in Kenya. Well, they were at that time, as you can see. So, over in America, it says, how many countries have mandatory paternity testing? There's unaware of any country that's mandatory paternity testing at this time. This was written before the El Salvador did it. Now, is it legal to get a paternity test in America? No, it's not illegal. Performing a paternity test is not illegal to perform it in the United States. When performing a DNA test, you should keep in mind that consent is needed to use a legally possible document. Now, if you want to do it in America, there's a site called IDTO. You can call for an appointment. Prices start at $350 and up. And benefits of legal testing, accuracy, confidentiality. What is a legal paternity test? Common uses: child support, child custody, birth certificate, name changes, immigration, estate if the guy dies and the child's not his biologically. There's problems there, and Social Security benefits. If you're in New York and you want it, you have to have a prescription from a New York doctor, a court order from a New York judge, or a letter from a New York licensed authority. And how much does it cost? Where can I get the legal paternity test done? These are all the states, but there's not 52 states there, there's only 48. So what's happened to the other 48, other 4 states? And what method can be used? How accurate is it testing? If you wanted to do it at home, you can get a home DNA test. 99.99% accurate results. And there's a video explaining it. If the woman says no, in the previous video I found a site that says you have to go through, you can get a court order in America, and the judge can order it, and then both parties have to agree. They have to do it no matter what the woman says. Now, still in America, I found this. The Virginia Department of Social Services established a paternity in Virginia, and a video about it if the parent lives in another state in America. So Virginia is starting to see the writing on the wall, because you drop down how DNA testing for child support works. DNA testing done in Laboratory Corporation, offices across the state. Medical testing professionals take the DNA samples, and then it'll cost you $115, but it'll save you 18 years of child support if you're not the biological father, and how establishing paternity helps the child. Can benefit the children in the short and long term. Establishing paternity can allow the child to claim certain kinds of Social Security, disability, or veteran benefits if the father dies or becomes disabled. It also grants rights to inheritance from the father. And before, if the father died and the child's not biologically his, that's all sorts of problems. And it gives the children a chance to know the medical history of both sides of their families. Now, also in Georgia, paternity testing is going to be out, because I found this. This is Jacksonville.com. New Georgian law will allow DNA testing on paternity before child support cases reaches the court. The new procedure that goes into effect on July 1st, that would be last year. This was done with Florida Times-Union. Under a new law, the Department of Human Services will now be able to conduct DNA tests for all child support cases in which paternity is unresolved. It met on Wednesday to discuss its rules, which will go into effect on July 1st. So if you're a Georgian, you've got the legal right to demand to see if you're biologically the child's father. Under the new law, any man that is proven to be the biological father will not have to pay child support. This bill was intended to end wrongful paternity claims prior to legal action. So all these Georgian women who are playing around and getting knocked up by other guys, they're screwed, because the guy that they're with can demand to know if he's the biological father, and she hasn't got any legs to stand on, so she has to think about that before she opens her legs to a man that she's not in a marriage to or in a steady relationship with. Now, to finish this off, I found this. Man conned into thinking baby was his is devastated. That's the guy and that's the baby he thought was his, but he's not. It says a man whose ex-partner forged paternity test results to make him believe he was the father of her child said that he did has ruined his life. Ryan Hampson was at the child's birth after rekindling his relationship with Beth Fernley, so they were not married, they were just common law wife, after she forged DNA test results to make it appear there was a 99% possibility he was the father, so she got knocked up by somebody else. She was able to forge the results so he thought he was the biological father. Now, she is from Warrington, my hometown, here in Cheshire, but Warrington's really in Lancashire, but when they changed the boundaries, they turned it into Cheshire. She's 26, admitted fraud by false representation at Liverpool Crown Court, but she was only sentenced to 13 months jail, but it was suspended for a year and a half, 18 months. Mr. Hampson, whose name was on the child's birth certificate, said his proudest moment was becoming a father. Well, it would, but when he found out it was a lie, he was left grieving over a child that was still alive. He called for a change in the law to allow for mandatory paternity testing before a birth is registered, but the Home Office said there are no plans to do so. And that's the bitch that did it. And he says he asked for a DNA test in 2019 after Foley told him she was pregnant. The court heard how Foley had asked him for £300 towards the test and sent him screenshots which he claimed were from a company, Easy DNA. And then yada 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 about it. Now, to finish this video off, because I think I'm getting on to the 20 minutes now, this is the UK government site, how to register a birth, who can register a birth. Married or civil partners, either parent can register a birth on their own. They can include both parents' details. Unmarried parents, like those other two, details of both parents can be included on the birth certificate if one of the following happens. They both sign it, one signs it and the other takes it to the office, and one parent goes to register the birth with the document from the court. But the mother can choose to register the birth without the child's father if they're not married or in a civil partnership. The father's details will not be included in the birth certificate. But that's not what she did. She did this. Excuse me, the room here, the air is dry. That's why my cough is coming along. So she did that, plus she forged the DNA evidence, and as a result, that child is not his, that child is somebody else's, so at least he won't have to pay child support for the next 18 years. But as I said, things are moving on, and this president in El Salvador is the first domino to fall, and it's a case of waiting to see if it moves across the Western world into America, in various states, and Canada. Well, in Georgia in America it sort of is, but we might see an end to paternity fraud and women being held accountable. I think I'm on the 20 minutes now, so I'll wrap it up. You know the routine, people. Like, dislike, comment, subscribe. It's completely up to you. So I'll double check the video for next Monday. But for now, that's it from me. Bye bye.